Welcome back to the new podcast series. It's Kelsey Kors with Sweetfish Media. Today I'm going to share with you a new podcast by our friends over at Interos. It's called What Lies Beneath. This podcast is for anything and everything about risk. The host is Jennifer Bisceglie, and she interviews risk management professionals from every industry, learning their ins and outs, ups and downs about protecting their companies and themselves from risk. If you think you'll find the show valuable after you check out this quick snippet, just search What Lies Beneath in Apple or your favorite podcast player. Make sure you subscribe, and if you really like it, don't forget to leave a review. In this episode snippet, she talks to Nick Beim about the human and AI partnership. Let's tune in.
AI is the most significant tech advancement that we've seen in the last 15 years. And even though it's been around for a long time, the increase in productivity we've seen with the advent of big data, of major internet platforms and available publicly, has enabled the technology to take off. And in addition, the technology is advancing in many different dimensions, not just in machine learning, in computer vision and natural language processing. And given that the major fuels for AI, data processing power and algorithms are all growing at a very significant rate, I think we're at the beginning of a very long AI boom. So I think this is the most significant technology that will likely reshape the economic landscape in the decades ahead. With regards to the investment strategy, I guess I'd say there are two major things that I'm particularly interested in. The first is the use of AI to do something fundamentally new and valuable. AI can be used for a lot of things, and certainly as a hot area, it's overmarketed these days. But when AI is combined with significant and often unique data sets, it can create fundamentally new capabilities that weren't possible just 3 or 4 years ago, and sometimes not even conceivable 4 or 5 years ago. And those are the types of uses of AI that I think the biggest companies will likely be created around. The second pillar is a distinctive data advantage. A lot of AI capabilities will be commoditized and offered by large platforms as free services in exchange for use of data. What's interesting to me is when a company has found a way to get access to, privileged access, exclusive access to very significant data sets and really be able to get a meaningful head start in an area and build additional moats on top of that initial data set access. And sometimes that comes from additional customer data, and sometimes it comes through large business development deals with other data providers. But if a company is able to do something fundamentally new and valuable, and they have a meaningful data advantage, and that leads to significant moats, I think there's a chance to build a multi-billion-dollar company.
I think they're all good points. And, here at Interos, we see the same thing, that technology and AI over the last 10 years have just created, for us, it's been a market. I do think it's a little bit interesting to think about things that aren't talked about enough when it comes to artificial intelligence. And two things that come to mind for me immediately, one, maybe because we had lawyers in the office yesterday, are the business ethics side of AI, or even the unconscious bias that a lot of folks are talking about. So, what are your thoughts on those? Or do you see other areas that haven't really been addressed or that are on the horizon we should be thinking about?
Great question. I think there are a variety of subjects that aren't talked about enough. I think the one that I'd put at the top of my list is that AI is very different from human intelligence. It's a natural initial reaction when a new technology comes out to understand and think creatively about the threats that it poses. And I think there was an immediate point that many people in AI research labs and in the press sort of seized upon in the early days of our most recent AI boom, which is that this will lead to a kind of superhuman form of intelligence, AGI in its strongest form. I think what we're finding, and as you really dig into the details of how AI is progressing, it's very different than human intelligence. Human intelligence is an interesting evolutionary of a lot of different capabilities that have merged together to help us optimize our survival and reproduction. And to think that computer intelligence will follow the same general path or that is representative of the same types of general understandings, I think is an interesting leap. We may both be subsets of a broader whole, but a lot remains to be proven. And specifically, what AI has been very good at to date is solving very narrow pattern recognition problems extremely well. So image recognition, language recognition, or paradigmatic use cases. But when it comes to the field of human judgment, so far, and we're still early in this revolution, so there's a long ways to go, the results so far have been pretty disappointing. AI has not been able to combine different understandings of context and be able to form a kind of reasoning that we would see as legitimate for complex human decisions. So I think there's a lot to be done, and the immediate anthropomorphism of saying, oh, AI is going to look a lot like us, I think is giving rise to a more complex reality. And many people have said, I think in my view rightly, that AI has made its biggest jumps by mimicking the human mind, and it may need to do more of that, in particular in building in more innate structure, sort of pre-wiring to do certain things very well, like we do. We have a predisposition to language that's extraordinary, and it's made us very effective. There are many other examples as well. So I guess at the top of my list of things that are not discussed enough, I would rank that very high. On ethics, I think it's a critical area for AI to be broadly used and broadly trusted, and particularly when you get to the level of making human-like judgments where people will ask, why should I trust that? I know who said so and why, and can you explain this to me? We need to be able to trust machines with the type of logic that would count in a human explanation, and we have a ways to go in that. I think there is a part of that problem is a bias of data sets. You know, one fascinating bias of data sets, and you see this in science, you see it in public safety, you see it in a lot of other fields, relates to gender. My wife is a genomics entrepreneur in the field of women's health, and she's really taught me about this. And there's some powerful examples, things like the development of seatbelts. Seatbelts were made by men and optimized for men and using data relating to men. And as a result, seatbelts historically worked very well for men, but worked much less well for women. And there were a lot more fatalities and car accidents for women just because of the way that sort of the data that they were built upon. In a lot of fields in health, the initial discoveries and the choice of what subjects to pursue were made by men, and the theories that followed them and the products that came out of them were developed by men. And so, as you can imagine, there was very little focus on women's health. And so I think an understanding of the significance of data that is, it need not be biased in the narrow sense. It could just be non-representative broadly, but understanding that when you're developing models, I think is critical.
Such an interesting topic by Nick over at Venrock. And wow, Jennifer is going to be a phenomenal host to this podcast. Again, to find this show, just search What Lies Beneath in Apple Podcasts or wherever you do your listening. Subscribe and leave a review if you like it. Maybe this podcast isn't for you, but you know someone who would like it? Well, don't forget to tell them. Tune in next week for an extra special episode. Until then.
I hate it when podcasts incessantly ask their listeners for reviews, but I get why they do it, because reviews are enormously helpful when you're trying to grow a podcast audience. So here's what we decided to do. If you leave a review for B2B Growth in Apple Podcasts and email me a screenshot of the review to james@sweetfishmedia.com, I'll send you a signed copy of my new book, Content-Based Networking, How to Instantly Connect with Anyone You Want to Know. We get a review, you get a free book. We both win.